Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Muhammad Rizky Maulana. My student's number is 2021-22-073. First of all, I'd like to thank Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala who has given us His mercy so that we can still breathe in this amazing world. We can meet together in this special occasion. Peace be upon to our great Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, to his family, his companions, his followers, and I hope you can be a part of his followers till the day of the judgment. Ladies and gentlemen, I am as a moderator today, and the members of this group consist of four people. The first one is me, Muhammad Rizky Maulana, and then Osi Nurviani, Rayhani Fitri Salsabila, and the last one is Awan Muhammad Riyadi. Today we are gonna discuss about something special, literal translation. And to use the times effectively, let us open our meeting by reciting Basmalah together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And for all of the presenters, time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Osi Nurviani. My student's number is 202122065. Today, I will explain about literal translation. Introduction. Newmark 1988 said that literal translation, or called straight translation or linear translation, is between word-for-word translation and pre-translation. In the process of translation, translator look for the grammatical construction of the source text that are similar or close to the target text grammatical patterns. The process of translation is delivered by carrying out word-for-word translation process, but then adjusted to the correct arrangement of the words or grammatical equivalence. And the next one, varieties of close translation. Word-for-word translation is transfer source language, grammar, and word order, as well as the primary meanings of all the source language words into the translation, and it is normally effective only for brief, simple, neutral sentences. For example, he works in the house now. And the next, one-to-one translation. Each source language word has a corresponding target language word, but their primarily isolated meanings may differ. For example, take an exam. Literal translation range from one word to one word through group to group. For the example, is a beautiful garden. The next is collocation to collocation. For the example is make a speech. The next is clause to clause. For example, when that was done. To sentence to sentence. For example, the man was in the street. And the next, the translation of poetry. The translation of poetry is the file where most emphasis is normally put on the creation of a new independent poem. In translating a poem, one of the literacy genres, the translators are also likely to face similar problems. The first step to deal with this problem is to find the deep structure. Find the logical subject first and then specific first. After that, the translator can reconstruct the structure in the target language as closely as possible to the original structure. And the last one, faithful and false friend. The translation of object and movement is usually more literal than that of qualities of moving. We must not be afraid of literal translation, or in particular of using a target language word which looks the same or nearly the same as the source language. And again, the more general and abstract word may or may not be translated transparently. There is often a shift at that abstract level, quality as property, but the translation is still usually one-to-one, and in general, they are more faithful friends. Many common adjectives of feeling cut up meaning in their own way, so that we cannot trust a transparent of loyal, important, brutal. Only one or two like excellent and marvelous are usually transparent.
Hi, my name is Rayhani Fitri Salsabila. My student's number is 2021222051. Words in their context. The one way of looking at translation is translate words all more or less bound by their syntactic, collocational, situational, cultural, and individual dialectal context, which suggests is lexical. The basic thought-carrying element of language is its grammar. But since the grammar is expressed only in words, we must get the words right. The recreative part of translation is often exaggerated and the literal part underestimated, particularly in literary translation, but also in other types of texts which have nothing linguistically wrong with them, which are competently written. The following extracts from an advertisement by Bendix Limited, when we might expect the widest divergences, bear a unique confection often copied, never equaled. Bisogno de confection unique sovan imitis mangiama egal. Au colatini besono un prodotto senza eguac spesso imitato e meguagliato. Beis am si zachtigach confec, de of nachke am obeni nachkemach vaden is. Elegant variations. Elegant variation on literal or one-to-one translation are common and help the translators understandable to write in a style or phrase that is entirely natural to him. They are irritating to the critic, introduced to exhibit the translator's flair for colloquialisms or synonym, and even when insignificant unnecessary. Literal translation may appear tedious, but there is satisfaction in weighing it against this or that more elegant version and finding it more accurate and economical. Thus, the first sentence of Bendix advert, Bendix of Mayfair have established a reputation respected throughout the world for the manufacture of chocolate confectionery of the highest quality. Bank of Mayfair ont établi la réputation reconnue dans le monde entier pour la confection de ses chocolats de la plus qualité. The translation is lexically and grammatically literal, but for confectionery, which has to be changed and is satisfactorily conflated with the manufacture, and the two unnecessary elegant variations, l'heure and reconnu. Back translation of text. The validity of literal translation can be established by the back translation test, e.g., crudely, a black frame should translate back centrally as un cadre noir and zwarte rakmen, etc. The back translation test is not valid in the case of SL or TL lexical gaps, thus a murky street, a bright vision, or un person maladive will not translate back satisfactorily. But the literary dictates of his time will never translate back satisfactorily into le modes littéraires de son temps. Note also that the figurative elements in language militates against literal translation when it is a cultural or a stock metaphor, but favors literal translation when it is universal and or original. Accepted translation. Some transparent institutional terms are translated literally in at least Western European languages, even though the TL cultural equivalents have widely different functions. Thus, president, senate, prefect, chancellor, mayor. For new institutional terms, a translator must be careful about translating the terms directly into the TL if they already exist but have quite different function in the TL culture.
Okay, thank you for recognition. I will continue the materials from previous presenters. Constraints on literal translation. The actual word may be used more frequently within the register, have a wider semantic range than corresponding TL word. Yet a perfectly natural SL unit produces a clumsy literal translation that is Hitler pioneered as this danger, the surprise, as he wasn't succeeding in freeing himself from his surprise. Then the translation is wrong, however expressive the rest of the SL text. He was unable to rid himself of his feeling of surprise. He couldn't overcome his surprise. And then natural translation is yet another of the tension within translation. In fact, by repeating several times to yourself, just like a natural unit of language, or by saying it in a soft tone of voice, you can sometimes make it sound more natural and convince yourself that it is a good translation. But note that it is sometimes advisable to read it from literal translation when faced with general words for which there are no satisfactory one-to-one equivalents, even though one is over-translating. Okay, and the third one is recreative translation. Recreative translation, contextual recreation as Delitzsch, 1981, calls in which means roughly translating the thought behind the word, sometimes with between the words, or translating the subtext, is a procedure which some authorities and translation teachers regard as the heart of the central issue of translation, get as far away as possible from the words. But most translation is not creative in this sense. You have to like struggling with words before you reach the longer passages. In recent years, London has in its notice and advertisements become a trilingual, often a quadrilingual EU at Dutch city. Coming so late to reality, the British Transport Board has profited from other mistakes and has done well. And the last one is literary translation. Literary translation is translation of creative and dramatic prose and poetry into other languages. This includes the translation of literature from ancient languages and translation of modern fiction so that it can reach a wider audience. That's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let me introduce myself. My name is Aung Muhammad Andrade and my student's number is 1921245. And in this occasion, I want to tell you about the Substack. There is Michel Mayer, 1974, has made much of the concept of the Substack. What is implied but not said, the meaning behind the meaning. To an intelligent reader, the true meaning behind the meaning is clear, and the translator must word the sentence in such a way that the subtext is actually clear in English. The above statement is in fact a plea for accuracy, and the implication is that the translation should not go beyond the word of the original by promoting the subtext to the status of the text. The concept of the subtext is a useful variant term for the function or the intention of a text. The thin thread which the translator has to pursue throughout his work. But the concept is dangerous and misleading if the subtext starts to obtrude on the text in other side. If the description or the surface text is partially or wholly replaced by the function, the deep structure of the text, the symbol by its meaning, and so on. And for example of subtext is a student goes to turn in his paper. After looking through 2 pages, his teacher asks, "Are you sure you want to turn this in?" From that, the subtext of the question is the intended clue to the student that the paper is not ready yet to be turned in and he should edit through it again. Okay, the next slide is the notion of the no equivalent words. The difficulties of literary translation are often highlighted not so much by linguistic or referential context as by the context of a cultural tradition. To write off as untranslatable a word whose meaning cannot be rendered literally and precisely by another word is absurd, particularly when it could at least be better delineated by componential analysis into 4 or 5 words through as a footnote, not in the text of the play, so what denoting notion items, phenomena which are typical only for certain language collective and not having analog in another language are defined with following term is equivalent vocabulary or word. And for example, this notion of the non-equivalent word is slang word. Pedalas material is about the rule of context. In translation, the translator indeed has to be aware of all the varieties of the context. So many it is idle to list them again, but this does not mean that context is the overriding factor in all translation and has primacy over any rule, theory, and primary meaning. Where a writer deliberately innovates, the translator has to follow him. A good literal translation must be effective in its own right. The less context-bound the word, the more likely a literal translation will is. The more standard are the colloquialism, idiom, stock metaphor, the less likely is a literal translation.
Thank you for all of the presenters who has presented the presentation very well, and I hope you guys you listen and understand about the materials better than us. And because time is up, let us close our meeting by reciting Hamdalah together. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. And I'm Muhammad Simaulan Alif. Thank you for your nice attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.